Well, joining me now from the American state of Maryland is Rabia Chaudhry. She's Adnan's friend, and she was just mentioned in Natalie's report, of course. She also went on to write the book, Adnan's Story. Rabia, great to talk to you on the Newsmakers. Are you confident that there will be a new trial? Because prosecutors have some time to appeal that decision by that court.
I'm actually not confident. I don't think the state will decide to go to trial. I'm a lawyer myself, and I know how difficult it would be for them to win a new trial. So I think their strategy will be to keep filing appeals as long as they can. And then when they run out of appeals, they will try to make some kind of a deal.
Okay, so let me ask you this question in another way then. Do you feel that if he was given a fair trial, he would be exonerated?
Absolutely.
Why?
Unquestionably. There is absolutely no evidence really against him, and in the most recent opinion that was issued last week by the second highest court in Maryland, the court actually said the same thing. They wrote 2 paragraphs about how there's nothing connecting him to the crime except for one very poor witness who has changed his story about 12 times. If you have no forensic evidence, you have no eyewitness testimony, you have no video evidence, there's nothing to connect him to the crime. In fact, the state even argues they're not even sure where she was killed, how she was killed, what time she was killed. They just have a witness that they forced. By the way, the police forced this witness to make false statements over and over. And these same police officers are involved in numerous cases where they did the same thing to other people.
Okay, having followed this closely for a long, long time, do you have any idea who else might have killed the victim, Haimin Lee?
You know, I have a very strong suggestion as to where the police should reopen the investigation. I cannot say who killed her for sure, but if I were to reopen the investigation, I would start with her boyfriend. She had a boyfriend at the time she was killed. Adnan was not her boyfriend. And there are many problems with his story. And they never tested him. They never took any forensic samples from him, his hair, his DNA, his fingerprints, nothing to test against the evidence. I would start there.
Okay, in a minute, I'm going to go back to some of the details over, guilt or innocence. But I want to step back for a second and ask you about Serial and the fact that this podcast had immense popularity around the world. Would we be having this discussion now, and would Adnan be facing the possibility of a new trial if it was not for that podcast?
No, not at all. We could not have come this far without Serial. Serial was responsible for making people care about Adnan, for making the courts pay closer attention to him. Serial is responsible for dozens of people helping us, investigators and lawyers that we didn't have before. And they're the reason we raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for his appeals.
Okay. And Rabia, now, I'm not here to debate his guilt or innocence. I don't know enough. I've just done some reading. I've read what the prosecutors have said. I've read what came out of the court case. Now, for example, what came out of the conviction was that there were cell phone records that pinned him in the location of where, I guess, she was killed or found. And we had the testimony of Jay Wiles. The prosecutor, Kevin Urich, said, quote, "It was pretty much a run-of-the-mill domestic violence murder." What would you respond to that?
This is the same prosecutor who told their star witness that I will prosecute you for murder unless you become a witness against Adnan. Now, if you are confident in your case and you really think that Adnan killed this girl, why would you threaten to prosecute somebody else? This is a prosecutor who has a record of hiding evidence, of playing dirty, and he's not alone. The Baltimore Police Department and District Attorney's Office has had decades of corruption and misconduct issues. Thankfully, a lot of it is coming to light nowadays. There's absolutely nothing connecting. Adnan's cell phone pinged towers that cover a huge area, including his school, his mosque, his house, all within the same range. And what they did was they took the cell records, they put it in front of this witness and said, now you have to give us a story that makes sense with these records. On top of which, this witness actually had Adnan's cell phone most of the day. Adnan did not have a cell phone with him. Adnan did not have a car. Adnan was at school, and he was seen at school by many people. He was sitting in the library with an alibi witness. This prosecutor is the same person who told that witness, do not come and testify for this man. Not even a man. He was a 17-year-old boy at the time. And this was a prosecutor who over and over again told the court Adnan's religion and ethnicity are factors, that this was an honor killing. He did it because he's a Muslim man. Adnan's religion and ethnicity was mentioned 300 times in his trial against a 17-year-old. That is unconstitutional. It is immoral, and it is wrong. It's because they didn't have a case.
And so his ex-defense attorney didn't follow up with the alibi witness that could have sort of exonerated him. But then the question is, okay, well, just because the defense screwed up, it doesn't necessarily mean that the man is innocent, right?
Well, I don't know. If somebody is saying, I was sitting with him in the library when this girl is being murdered, it kind of sounds like somebody screwed up.
What would your lesson be, or your message rather, be to those who feel that this is just kind of identity politics? It is a run-of-the-mill domestic violence murder, as the prosecutor says, but ultimately, just because he said all of this stuff about Muslims or honor killing and so forth, you're making it into a crusade to defend a minority Muslim man against an unjust system.
No, you know, after I've worked on Adnan's case for 19 years because I've known him since he was a child. But after Adnan's case, I worked on about a dozen other cases with my team. And you know what? This is not a run-of-the-mill domestic violence case. It is a run-of-the-mill wrongful conviction case. What happened in Adnan's case, you see over and over again. And I'll give you an example. The West Memphis 3 case from the 1980s, 1990s. 3 young white boys were convicted of the murder, wrongfully convicted of the murder of 3 little boys. And you know what they used against them? They said that they were Satanists. They didn't have evidence. So this is not uncommon for prosecutors to say, well, we don't have actual evidence. What can we prove? So they play the identity politics. We did not bring in his identity or his religion or his ethnicity into the case. They did. And you cannot make the argument on one hand that his religion had nothing to do with this, but then you are the one bringing his religion up over and over again. They had to do that because they had to create an atmosphere in which the jury said, well, maybe it has something to do with his belief system. They did this with the West Memphis 3. For 19 years, those 3 young men languished in prison because the prosecutor convinced the jury that they were Satanists, that they worship Satan, so they killed these children, against all the forensic evidence. So this is a run-of-the-mill wrongful conviction case. And I can't tell you how many people who have been wrongfully convicted and exonerated have come forward to us and said, this case is so much like my case.
Right. Rabia, tell me, since you know him, and you've known him, as you say, for such a long time, since he was a young boy, what kind of man is he?
Adnan is the same kind of man I knew. There's a reason I have stuck by him this long, and there's a reason people stick by him, because he is an incredibly kind and generous and gentle person. I get angry about this case. I get angry about the people. And, you know, to this day, he's never said anything terrible about anybody in this case. He has spent 19 years in prison since he was 17 years old. In 19 years, he's never had a fight in prison. He is that averse to conflict and violence. People have terrible fights in prison. Prison is a very dangerous place. He has never once had an altercation in prison. And again, this is also a very common theme amongst the wrongfully convicted. You'll find most wrongfully convicted people will have very clean prison records because they're not criminals. They never were.
Okay, and circling back to the very beginning, because you said you're not confident that he's going to get a fresh trial. So what happens then? What are his options? Are you looking at helping him in some way if they decide, listen, the prosecution's case is still strong, the conviction stands, no fresh trial, what happens next?
There is no conviction anymore. His convictions are gone. He is like somebody who is right now presumed innocent and is facing charges, like he just got arrested. There's no convictions anymore. He's not a convicted anything anymore. If the prosecution says, you know what, we actually do want to go back to trial, we would welcome it. Okay. We will destroy them. I mean, as simple as that. But they won't do it. They will not do it because they're going to lose.
I read something that suggested that, you know, under Marilyn Mosby, there might be some sort of deal to be cut. How does that work? Would that mean some sort of admission of guilt in order to cut a deal?
Yeah, so what happens in cases like this, and this is again very common, is when a prosecutor decides, well, I've lost all the appeals, I don't want to go to trial, we can offer something called an Alford plea to somebody like this. An Alford plea allows a defendant to maintain his innocence, but take a guilty plea. It is a very strange legal construction. But a person can say, I will agree to time served. I will agree to have this on my record, but I maintain my innocence. That's actually what happened in the West Memphis 3 case. It has happened in a lot of cases. It's called an Alford plea. If Marilyn Mosby offers an Alford plea, I mean, I don't know. Adnan could take it, or Adnan could say, no, I want to go to trial. But then that could mean another 5 years in prison for him while he awaits trial.
Right. Rabia Chaudhry, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us on the
Thank you.
Newsmakers.
Thanks for having me.